It is startup season, and what's more fun than telling you some players that you shouldn't be drafting? I'm joined by the fantastic Ryan McDowell of DLF. It's time to get negative and talk about some guys that we don't want any part of right now in startups. Ryan, we're going to kick things off. As soon as you sent me this player, I was excited to talk about him because I feel like this could be slightly spicy. You can see it on the screen there. Caleb Williams, QB9, 19th overall. So what is it you don't like about Caleb Williams, Ron?
Well, already I would back off your statement of don't want any part of. You want a little bit of Caleb Williams for sure because obviously the upside is there with what they've got going in Chicago. Really, as with a lot of these players, very rarely am I going to be completely hands off or on the opposite end, all in on a player. It's always about the value that they are offering, and so we're chasing ADPs we like, and we're avoiding ADPs that we don't like. And really, that's the deal with Caleb Williams here at 19 overall as the QB9. I think he's just slightly overvalued, maybe even by less than a full round. I like him more in that mid-third round range than here in the mid to late second round. But he's above being drafted above Kyler Murray, who I certainly would take over Caleb. And then some of the wide receivers. We talked on our undervalued episode about the idea of potentially avoiding quarterback, or at least avoiding your QB2 in those early rounds, and waiting a little bit. This is the time to do that because Brian Thomas is going right behind Caleb Williams, Nico Collins, and Drake London close behind that. So I think this second round is a great spot. Assuming you've gone QB1 in the first round, I like going with the wide receiver here in the second, and waiting on that QB2. And that's really the story with Williams. He's not a player I'm avoiding altogether. I just think the ADP's a little too high for me right now.
Yeah, I think for me, this is the perfect example of where, with a position that has the shelf life and longevity potentially of quarterback, we lust after age too early. And I think that Caleb Williams, if he has a year where he finishes as a QB1, I'd be fine with this valuation. But for me, to be a second round pick in a startup, I need to have seen something. Like this is a guy that doesn't have QB1 overall upside. Like this isn't a guy I can ever see going 101 in a Superflex startup. So why am I having to spend a second round pick to go and acquire a guy that this is probably about where his ceiling is for fantasy production? I think he could, maybe get up to that second tier of quarterbacks, but I don't see him breaking into the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Hurts, Daniels tier of production. So why would I do that? I'd much rather, we talked about Dak Prescott on the other show. If you could give me Dak Prescott or Caleb Williams straight up, I'd have to really think about that. Maybe I'd lean Caleb, but it's definitely a conversation. If you're telling me I can get Dak Prescott 2 rounds later than Caleb Williams, that's a decision I'm making every single day of the week. I just think we're getting a little bit too obsessed with chasing upside, chasing age. And yes, we've got Ben Johnson. Yes, we've got, additional weapons added in terms of a really intriguing tight end that I love. And it's all great. And we can kind of sell the upside and the picture and all this kind of stuff. But best case scenario, I don't think Caleb Williams has got the rushing profile to be able to be a top 5 quarterback. So I feel like he's valued at his ceiling, which whenever a player is valued at his ceiling, it's always very alarming to me. And, that's before we get on to some of the issues. I think, okay, the offensive line was bad last year, but Caleb Williams didn't help that. 28.2% pressure to sack. That's horrendous. I think that he has real issues moving around in the pocket. And I don't think Ben Johnson's necessarily going to be able to just wave a magic wand and solve that, because I think that is more of an inherent problem than I think a lot of people would like to admit.
Yeah, not much of a value loss for Caleb Williams. He was being drafted 13 overall this time last year, which just feels wild. So a slight drop, but maybe not even as much as you would expect. I mentioned Kyler Murray being drafted about a half a round below Caleb. Some other quarterbacks behind him, CJ Stroud. I'm actually fine with Caleb over Stroud at this point. Kyler's the one I have a bigger problem with. And then you get Nix, who outperformed Caleb Williams last year in their respective rookie seasons. Jordan Love is down there. So again, it's the quarterback depth is the story. And that depth suggests that unless you do believe Caleb has top, top 2 or 3 overall quarterback upside, that he's just not worth this pick. As you said, wait for Dak. I mean, honestly, even wait for Brock Purdy, who's a similar, I think probably a similar production profile to Dak and can be had in the 3rd or even 4th round.
Yeah, I think to me, when you're making a selection of a quarterback, you need to almost explain to yourself the story of what you're hoping this pick comes. Is this a
Yep.
guy that I'm drafting to chase QB1 upside? Is this a guy that I think, okay, there's some inherent risk there, but he's got a chance to go and be a top 6 quarterback? Or is this a guy that I'm drafting like a Dak Prescott, like a Brock Purdy, who doesn't have that elite upside, but is going to be a QB2 for years to come? And I think Caleb Williams doesn't fit in either of those boats. I don't think he's got the safety and security of being a QB2 for years to come, because there is risk there. If he has a terrible year this year, he's going to plummet in value because people are going to say it's a Caleb problem because he's got the offensive coordinator, he's got the line improved, he's got all the weapons you could imagine, and he doesn't have that upside. So yeah, if you're chasing upside, give me Kyler, give me Jordan Love every day of the week. If you're looking security, give me that, give me Purdy. It's just, I don't understand this value because I don't get what you're chasing with Caleb Williams. So for me, I'd struggle to hit this pick. If it's a 4th round pick, I'm probably comfortable there, but you're not spending that. And yeah, I find him a really, really interesting case study this year because this value feels out of whack, certainly. We're going to move across to the wide receiver position. Jameson Williams, we talked about Ben Johnson leaving the Lions to join the Bears. Jameson Williams left behind, wide receiver 33 in ADP, 88th overall. For me, this just feels like there is people are expecting it to just continue as it did last year. I think he's going to be a volatile pick. We know that the volume is going to go through some Brown. It's going to go through Gibbs. It's going to go through Laporta, and James Williams is going to have some spike weeks, but he's going to have some weeks where he's incredibly infuriating to click his name and put into your lineup. Plus, there's the potential that this offense takes a big step back. If Ben Johnson is as good as everybody says he is, it could take a drop back. And that's where, for me to be picking him as a wide receiver 3 in ADP, it's too risky without that elite upside, because I don't think the volume is going to be there to ever warrant him being a top 24 wide receiver.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it's been a wild 3 years for Jameson Williams. Perhaps what is most impressive for him is that he's been able to maintain his value. Still a top 100 asset, at least based on our ADP. Not in my opinion, though. You look at year 1, year 2. He goes the full 2 seasons with more suspensions than wide receiver 1 games, and then finally, in what we're calling a breakout season last year, he gives us 3 games as a wide receiver 1. He's kind of your prototypical deep threat, big play guy. He's going to score 25 fantasy points in 2 or 3 games every single year. Good luck figuring out when those are going to be. He's going to be the 4th option at best in this offense. And this is a team that is continuing to add weapons on offense. And, I don't know that Isaac Tesla is going to overtake Jameson Williams for snaps or anything like that, but they keep adding pieces and kind of muddying the water there in Detroit. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm staying away from JMO here as a top 100 dynasty player.
Yeah, and I think that what the Lions did last year was impressive in terms of they used him more of those crossing routes and some run after the catch opportunities, and gave him the opportunity to develop into a bit of a more all-round player than just a kind of a pure deep threat. But I still just don't come back to this volume thing. And it's like, for me to be
Yeah.
paying this price, I need a guy that is going to be able to see volume. And outside of a St. Brown injury, I don't think there's ever going to be the volume there, because as much as we hate to admit it, this offense is still going to be run first. You know, they've still got Gibbs, they've still got Montgomery, and that's where the ball's going to go most of the time. So I think Jameson Williams is always going to be a boom bust option. It's like, yeah, I'm very happy with him in my flex, but as my wide receiver 3, I'm looking for some more security there. So yeah, I'm going to opt out at that position. Before we get to my next pick, though, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do it now. Best ball season is well underway, and of course, I'm going to keep you ticking along with all the Dynasty content you will need. James Cook is my next pick, running back 13 overall, 56th overall in ADP, Ryan. I wrote an article on DFF, I want to say 3-4 weeks ago now, about James Cook, saying if you're looking for a win now target, go ahead and get him now. But I am seriously concerned about the talk coming out of Buffalo and this contract situation. And I have no idea where he's going to be playing football in 2026. So I am very concerned. Are you with me that this could be a 1-year boom with, let's say, a potential changing landing spot on the horizon?
Yeah, I think we've got to keep that contract situation, kind of keep an eye on that for sure. Mini camps are starting, and yes, those are optional or voluntary for most teams. But when players don't show up, it certainly gives us at least a small reason for concern, and that's the report we got from the Bills this week. With James Cook, so much of his production last year came via the touchdown, which might be surprising because, going back a year or, even 2 years into Cook's career, the big concern was that he's not going to get the touchdown production because of course, Josh Allen. You got Josh Allen, 34 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 years. That's third most in the league, and 14 more than James Cook has produced. And then last year we get the breakout with, I believe, 16 rushing touchdowns for Cook. I mean, that touchdown production represented 41% of his fantasy production last year. And that is, it was the most by anybody with more than 60 carries last season. And it's the 6th most of any RB1 since 1992. So that is, that's a number that we cannot count on being replicated in 2025. And as you said, throw in the contract concerns. And I think there's lots of reasons to avoid James Cook. And Rich, you said if you're trying to win now, if you've got that contender, go with James Cook. I would even push back on that, because one spot behind James Cook is Derrick Henry. So if you've got that win now team, or you're trying to build a contender, take Derrick Henry. If you're in an existing league, trade for Derrick Henry instead of James Cook, and go try to win that title. But I'm 100% with you. Cook is a player I am staying away from in startups.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to hit on that touchdown point a little bit more. So his touchdown rate last year was 7.7%. His career average, which includes that incredible touchdown rate last year, was 3.8%. If you were to give him his career average on touchdown rate last year, it drops him from 16.5 points per game to 13.5 points a game. That's the difference of him dropping from RB11 overall, but to RB21. Like, you're giving him a career average touchdown rate, and he's suddenly a back end RB2. Like, that's alarming for a guy that you're having to, draft almost as an RB1. So yeah, I'm really concerned about James Cook. As I said, longevity, but also I think it could be a a fallback in terms of this year as well. But that concludes it. 3 players you need to be avoiding in your drafts this year. Ryan, thank you ever so much for coming on. Remind everybody that is watching and listening, where can they find you and where can they find your work?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rich. Always a great time. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Same at over at Blue Sky. Find my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com and also co-host the DLF Dynasty podcast.
Beautiful. Thank you ever so much for jumping on, Ryan. It's always a great time to chat things through with you, and we'll be back very, very soon.